Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are. Thank you so much also for taking the time on your busy Saturday schedule to be with us. And today we actually have the very good fortune of actually inviting the founder and director of Franzé Developments, Mr. Paul Franzé. Thank you so much for being here.
No worries. Thanks, Ernest. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and beside Paul, there's also Nick. I think Nick's slightly off camera for the time being. Yes. Hi, Nick. How's your weekend again, Nick?
Yeah, very good, Ernest. Thank you. It's good to be opened up out of lockdown, as opposed to our Melbourne friends. But it's good to be out in the street with people out here again. It's great.
Excellent. Yeah, this morning I drove past the development site, and life is slowly starting to come back again. There were quite a few people on the roads, and they were all going to the cafes, and you could see that. And my friends in Melbourne were saying, "Dang it, we're still locked." I said, well, that's the benefit of being in regional, and we're not so regional. We're actually quite city-like.
Yeah, we're sitting on in the display now, which is in Little Mallet Street, the main sort of food and beverage area, and the whole street is absolutely packed. It looks amazing.
Well, imagine this: if you're actually waking up right now on a Saturday afternoon to have brunch, this is a perfect time to actually just mosey on down, have your brunch, go back up and start your party again.
100%.
Well done. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we actually wanted to talk about Franzé Developments per se, and we've actually got the good fortune of actually getting the founder of Franzé Developments himself, Mr. Paul Franzé. Now, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. I just wanted to ask you, Paul, can you just tell us a little bit about the background of Franzé Developments and how long has it been running?
Yeah, sure. Look, we've been operating now for in excess of 20 years. So we're a small to medium family-owned development company. We're a non-sector-centric development company, meaning that we traverse or transcend developments across various sectors, from commercial to retail, to residential to industrial. We've probably got more of a high-end residential flavour or spin than we do across the other sectors. But my background in my previous corporate life, working for Coles Myer, that enabled me to, I suppose, work across the retail and commercial spectrum. And then on top of that, I've been able to develop, various residential projects across not only Victoria but in Queensland over the past 20 odd years.
Would you be able to give a ballpark figure as to how many developments you've done, whether it's residential, commercial, or beyond that?
Look, it's in the it'd be in the not the hundreds, but it'd be in the tens across both in my private company, in joint venture, and in my corporate life. More recently, we've just completed a high-end residential development in Kew, known as the Alexandra. That sort of exceeded everyone's expectations in terms of the square metre rate average that we were able to achieve in Kew, and the product that we were able to deliver. It was a heavily, I suppose, promoted and wanted apartment development opposite the Alexandra Gardens. The product that we delivered was very, very high end. We had Sub-Zero and Wolf appliances. Everyone got Sub-Zero and Wolf. Depending on the size of the apartment, would determine what type of oven or what type of cooktop, what type of fridge and freezer and wine fridge. Everyone got those appliances as part of the purchase. So, French oak floor, marble throughout all the bathrooms. There was no tiles. It was all broad slab that we had in pretty much all the wet areas and throughout the kitchen. So it was very high end, targeted towards downsizers, owner-occupiers that lived within the Burundara precinct. It's only 23 apartments. So that was very successful. Prior to that, we've also done other residential developments in South Yarra and Paran, townhouse product in Brunswick. So we've sort of looked at opportunities across the growth corridors within the Melbourne CBD area, and then more recently, obviously in Geelong, with the Geelong Quarter, which encompasses Ryrie Home and Ryrie Residences, which sit above a 180-room hotel, which will be operated under the IHG umbrella or Holiday Inn. So We've got a vast sort of background or experience across, originally in sort of investor style product from an apartment residential perspective to more recently, moving with the market to an owner occupied product.
Wow, this sounds like a very extensive background, and you've definitely got experience in a lot of different markets as well, not just in the regional market, but also in the city market. It sounds to me as though you've been very much focused in the city areas to begin with. Why Geelong? Can I just ask you before we get into the development specific, but why did you select Geelong?
Look, whether it was a bit of foresight and vision and opportunity, it was probably a mixture of the two, and probably an element of luck. We were able to secure the site off market 3 odd years ago, and we were probably slightly ahead of the curve in terms of the tree change and sea change movement, and that's only been sort of accentuated by COVID and the ability for people to move out of the CBD into more regional lifestyle locations, and Geelong being one of those. Geelong has probably a dozen, world-class surf beaches in the world, not only in the state or the country, but probably in the world. Bells Beach is a classic one that everyone knows worldwide, made famous by the Point Break movie, but also every year, other than last year or this year, I think it was, it holds one of the rounds for the championship from the surfing, the major surfing competition. I suppose Geelong's been growing exponentially and organically just because of what it provides in terms of amenity, proximity to the Melbourne CBD, lifestyle, and affordability. So there's a myriad of reasons why benefits why people are moving to Geelong, in particular, regional locations, in particular Geelong. It's the fastest growing regional city in the country. I think it's in the top 5 locations in terms of growth in the country across both regional and metropolitan towns or cities. And the government investment here is probably second to none in terms of the amount of infrastructure. There's the fast train that's commencing shortly. That's going to be complete in the next 5 years. There's the Spirit of Tasmania, which now I think as of the end of next year there's a 30-year lease term for all travelling parties via boat. Will, instead of being at Station Hill, be in Geelong. And then aside from that, you've got government departments like NDIS, WorkSafe, WorkCover. So there's a lot of infrastructure spend, which in turn requires people to work, and that then enables, or contributes to the growth, that investment, and then on top of private sector investment, and the ability to, I suppose now with COVID, to not necessarily be in the office. You can be at home 2 days, 3 days a week, and what not a better place than Geelong if you had to travel to Melbourne. It's a 45-minute drive, or a 50-minute in the train, soon to be sort of 20-25 minutes. So there's a lot of benefits. So we as part of our analysis and research that we do when we undertake any development, we looked at the opportunity and the ability to provide a product that will grow, but also understand that from a cyclical point of view, Geelong is at an early phase of its apartment growth and its apartment development. So, for us, we felt that we'd be able to come in, provide a product not dissimilar to what we've done in our other projects that hasn't really been done or seen in Geelong. And what that also does, it provides an investor a level of comfort, know that we can not only deliver the project, but they're getting in an investment or an apartment sense, almost not at ground zero, but on the way up, so they can be able to ride the curve and that growth curve. So Geelong's been growing, double digits for the last 3 years. I think, the median house price is, going to kick over $1 million in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. So, and the apartment median price is on its way up also. So, I think there's great opportunity, and that's sort of an underlying factor as to how and why we came to Geelong.
Wow. It's also quite interesting that you pointed out that the median house price in Geelong is going to be soon exceeding $1 million. Because by virtue of the fact that Australia has a lot of land, I mean, let's not look just at Geelong, but Australia-wide per se, there's a lot of land per se. A lot of people whom would naturally think, land and home packages would probably be the go-to, the natural go-to. So staying in an apartment may not necessarily be a concept that some of the regional area inhabitants would be familiar with. But what I'm actually hearing from you and what I've also seen is that it's not necessarily only Geelongians that's taking advantage of this. It's actually from Melbourne itself who want to actually have that option to also not just ride the wave, but also have something that they can use during this period. Would that be correct?
Yeah, we've had several purchasers that see benefit in having an apartment and an apartment style living in Geelong, because now with the road infrastructure and the ring road that's being built, you're literally 20 minutes away from half a dozen really top class beaches. So people have looked at that and think, well, I really want a holiday home, but I don't want the upkeep. I don't want to worry about doing the garden, worried about this and worried about that. So this gives them the best of both worlds, because the location of our site, we're in the western section of the Geelong CBD. It's known as the Arts Precinct, which is undergoing, again, massive gentrification. Our display suite's located on the corner of Little Mallup and James Street, and it's got an unbelievable sort of vibe and pedestrian and vehicular access that has a mixture of food offers, bars and cafes, and we're literally a couple of hundred meters away, and essentially the path of access to our site is linked to this location, and across from our site, directly across, there's in excess of $500 million being spent from the state and local government for the Geelong Performing Arts Precinct. So there's going to be 3 theatres there across the road. So what people want, I suppose, now is level of security, but also a level of amenities, so that you can come down here for the night, a weekend, have access to the best cafes, restaurants and bars, go for a walk down to the waterfront, go to a walk to Johnson Park, but then also be able to jump in the car and go for a surf or go for a swim and be back. So we provide that with our development and with the product that we're selling.
Sounds like a fantastic product. But let's dive into it right now to uncover it further. Now, in the Geelong Arts Precinct or the Geelong Quarter per se, there's not too many high-rises per se. How does this particular development fit in? Before you actually talk about that, what was your inspiration first for Ryrie Homes? Can I ask you that first?
Look, we wanted to provide something, I suppose, that's a little bit different. Most of the developments that we do, if not all of them, we generally try and provide a more we provide bang and bang for your buck in terms of the finishes that we provide. We've got 2.9 metre ceilings in the living areas, exposed concrete soffit to give that sort of industrial New York style feel. And the inspiration for that was the history of Geelong and the history of its manufacturing sort of roots, and the existing old buildings that you see. The architect, this international architect, they, in conjunction with the urban designers and with council and with government, we came up with a design that, I suppose, encompassed Geelong and what Geelong is in terms of historical architecture. So we tried to incorporate that within the Ryrie home and also in the Ryrie residences and the hotel next door. So we've got French oak floor throughout. We've got porcelain, porcelain and stone tops throughout the apartments, floor to ceiling glass. So we tried to create a product there's a level of quality that hasn't necessarily been seen in Geelong, but we also wanted to create a product that was seamless and timeless and contemporary, that would sort of last the test of time at the same time.
Wow, I really like the fact that you said you want to create something that's going to last the test of time and also very contemporary. But is this how you actually envision the development, Ryrie Homes, within the Geelong Quarter itself in terms of blending in? It's not going to stick out like whoa, it's this monolith that's there. It's going to be blended in, I reckon.
No, look, it does. I think we've been considerate and measured in our approach, particularly with the architect. I mean, I've got to say, I let the bakers bake, so I can sort of impart my vision to and my thought about what I want to provide to the market based on my research and what I think the market demands and will accept. And then it's up to the architect in consultation with us over a period of months to come up with a design that we think would fit and sit well in the precinct. And it definitely does. I mean, we're a gateway site in the way into Geelong. We're able to state government issued permit. It's a site of significance. So we had to work with the key stakeholders to come up with a product and a building that reflects the level of quality that we want to try and maintain, but also fit in with the existing architecture within the western section of the CBD.
Well done. So in terms of the how would this particular development blend into, like, for instance, the arts precinct per se? What I'm trying to get at is that if the people are going to be investors, if the buyers are going to be investors per se, then if they're not going to be there permanently, it may actually impact the arts precinct, would it not? But I presume there's a lot of buyers who are coming in are not just investors; they're actually high owner occupying rates or ratios that's being seen right now at Ryrie Homes. Yeah,
there's a huge push. There's a huge shift, not only in regional locations but across the board in Australia, where owner occupiers have become much more understanding and accepting and more educated about apartment living. I mean, you've got to understand we're a young country, and when you then compound that to regional locations like Geelong, we're at a very, very early stage of where the apartment cycle is. So there's huge growth opportunities, and there's not a massive amount of other buildings that are being built at the moment. So there's not an oversupply. It's a steady organic growth. There's probably a 70-30 split at the moment in terms of owner occupiers. A lot of young professionals, double income, no kids, and people that are using this as a transition from, where they may have been in a small flat into a much more appointed, larger apartment. And then, potentially some of these guys have got young kids and they may stay for the next few years, and then they may move on to the house. But the old story about house and land, that has an appeal to a certain number of people. But the problem with house and land historically is that through urban sprawl, like you mentioned earlier, we're such a large country, but there's no infrastructure, there's no amenity for the house and land, and it's not, I suppose, where Generation Y, Generation X, where and the millennials as they're moving out into the workforce and looking for their first investment or their first property, they essentially want the benefits of having an apartment in a city and what comes with that.
Yeah, it sounds to me it's the best of both worlds, or best of many worlds, in fact. It's location, it's entertainment, it's ability to be the center of transportation as well. So it's actually quite at a confluence of a lot of things. As opposed to just land and property, which is far away. You may have a big size, yes, but if you don't have a car, or if transportation is required, if you need to rely on public transportation, it may be a bit of a challenge. It becomes
a challenge. It becomes difficult, and I think here you've got the best of having the amenity, having all the services, having all the infrastructure at your doorstep, but also have the capital growth because of how quick and how fast Geelong is growing.
I just wanted to touch base with you with regard to Ryrie residences, which you brought up briefly just now, and Holiday Inn per se. How different is the Ryrie residences from Ryrie Homes per se?
Look, the Ryrie residences are probably targeted not solely, but more or less to retirees or downsizers that that are looking at their next phase of their life. There's only 15 apartments that sit above the hotel. It's a different price point. It's targeted more for, as I said, not dependent style living, but people that want to have access to some of the amenities that the hotel offer. But the price points are much higher in terms of what the offer is, and the apartments probably 200 to 300 square meters in size. So they're more of a penthouse style apartment. We just felt that that on the back of what we achieved in our Q project, there was definitely a demand for that price point and that style of apartment. Equally, through the research that we did, we discovered that there's also an undertow or an undersupply of apartments in that 400 to $1.25 million range, that where people are a little bit more price sensitive. They may be at different phases of their life, but also we've been able to provide the similar, if not the same level of quality in terms of finishes in both buildings.
How long will the Holiday Inn be operating at Ryrie Residences?
Both buildings are coming up simultaneously, so we're due to complete in the fourth quarter of next year, somewhere between September and November at this stage, COVID permitting. But at this stage, we haven't been slowed down by COVID or anything like that. A Holiday Inn is a 20-year agreement that we have with Intercontinental Group. We just think that that's going to add so much to the precinct from the Geelong Quarter. Our vision at the start was to create a fully mixed-use integrated development, which I think we're well on the way to achieving that. We've got about 800 square metres of retail across both buildings on the ground level. We've also got what they call a sky lobby on level 1 that sits and services the hotel, which has conferencing, corporate facilities, function rooms, all-day dining, bar, cafe, and some co-working space. So, you could literally stay within the precinct and not actually have to move at all, because one of the things that we're looking to also bring across and impart into the development, we've engaged in a tender process for a food and beverage consultant, whereby we want to make sure that the Geelong Quarter becomes a destination and a precinct for food and cafe and restaurants, so that our purchasers and our apartments are going to be serviced by good food, good cafes, and there's great amenity for the people that are going to live there for the time to come.
I mean, for any potential buyer or investor for Ryrie Homes, I mean, they'll be really comforted in knowing that they're not getting the top end of the entire development. There's actually something else that's much more expensive, and it's also linked to a world-class and renowned hotel as well, and operator as well. So it's all within the same development per se. So there's actually quite a spread that you have from entry level right up to, say, the premium level and all that.
And look, one of the things that I try and do with most of my developments is control the ground level, so that we're not just leasing it for the sake of leasing it, and then it becomes vacant. Because we want to try and maintain a level of amenity, a level of quality, and a level of service for the apartment buyers, so that they know that they become part of a community, and it then doesn't just look like an unrun or disused sort of standard retail premises sometimes that you see in a lot of other buildings, where they just lease it for the sake of leasing it, and the operator's got no experience whatsoever, and then it becomes a bit of a dogfight to try and get someone else to come in down the track. That doesn't bode well with me, and I think it's unfair for the purchasers, particularly the owner occupiers and the investors for that matter. And it's important that we try and maintain a level of consistency and control on the ground level to provide that amenity.
Paul, can I just ask you, in your own research and what you've also been talking to with your consultants per se, where do you see this particular development, say, in the next 5 to 10 years, in terms of capital growth, in terms of acceptability, in terms of even competitors, pencil developments that's coming up? That means with no other amenities, just piece of land, and they build it up just so that they can maximize returns for themselves or what they're trying to do.
Look, I think the way that we're heading, particularly from a statistical data perspective, from a growth point of view, I think Geelong's going to grow, and that growth is going to require more accommodation, whether it be in the CBD and also in the outskirts in suburbia, so to speak, or house and land and stuff. Either way, there's going to be a need for further infrastructure spend, which the government will continually do, both state and federal. Look, we see, as I said earlier, the Geelong Quarter, particularly Ryrie Home, from an investment perspective and a capital growth point of view, we're at the very early stages of where the growth curve is and the bell curve. So we see that there's significant upside in terms of our capital growth. And as more developments get earmarked, or more developers come in and look to try and put their money and invest their money in Geelong, there'll be more opportunities. But those opportunities, then all that happens is that progressively the comparable sales and the growth curve continues to go up. So as that occurs, our apartments will increase in value and increase in price. So it's like anything. If you look historically across Melbourne, Sydney, any major, Hong Kong, Singapore, over the last 5 to 10 years, the square metre rates and the price points have increased exponentially as the cities grow. So it's going to be no different to Geelong.
Brilliant. Well, for our viewers who are in Asia and Asia Pacific, as I was talking to Nick last week, he was telling me that the best time to buy was yesterday. I keep saying the best time to buy was actually last year. Yeah. But if you missed that and you missed yesterday, don't wait till tomorrow. That's the only thing I can say, because I've not seen things come down in price so significantly that at the end of the day, over a period of time, real estate will actually help you preserve your wealth and grow your wealth, in fact. And thanks for elaborating on that, Paul, because I think what you said hits the nail on the head. It's not unlimited offering. It's very limited. It's only 109 units, I understand. Yep. And you've already sold quite a bit already too, before you even mass marketed it, because people are already looking for this product. So I think that's extremely encouraging.
Definitely.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, with regard to also, when you talked about the management of this building per se, a lot of people are saying that, there's some developers in Melbourne CBD that's offering XYZ as a complimentary or as an additional product if you were to take a discount or rebate per se when they actually purchase. Can I just ask you, what's your thought on that, particularly in terms of developers in Melbourne trying to incentivize buyers to buy as opposed to your product?
It's an interesting sort of discussion piece, to be honest, because obviously, as the world has, COVID's hit significantly in a lot of major metropolises around the world. In particular, Melbourne is one, and that stems from, I suppose, the lack of international students and the lack of migration that's occurred into the country because of COVID. And there's been developments that were on market, about to come on market, or about to complete during this term. So unfortunately, developers have turned to throwing the steak knives and the kitchen sink in as part of the deal in order to try and coerce people into purchasing. I'm not a big believer of, I've seen one recently where someone was offering a 1 Series BMW. Well, the fact is that I don't think they're giving away the BMW for free, put it that way. I think it's factored into the price. I think that when you look at our product is priced, it's not cheap. We're not sort of scraping the barrel sort of product, and we're not up we're well priced, and we're balanced in line or commensurate with the offering and the product that we're going to deliver in terms of finishes perspective. So, pretty much all our product, we don't necessarily have a massive amount of upgrades. The Ryrie Residence, as an example, there's no upgrade. It's just a colour. It's just a colour differential, either dark or light. So we've taken that on board based on our previous experience, that we try and offer that little bit less extra level of amenity, but also finishes, and we price the apartments accordingly. I'm not a big fan of these wholesale discounts and these sort of fake discounts that other developers provide as part of. It's almost like a gimmick to an extent. But in saying that, we also we're not against providing some level or some type of incentive, but it's got to be commensurate with what the product is at the end of the day. And I don't think it's necessary at this point in time in Geelong, because we're somewhat insulated and isolated from that product. You've got to understand that Melbourne CBD particularly is underpinned by massive international student and the student packages from a migration perspective. So some of these developers literally have no choice but to try and wholesale discount some of these products in order to get them out the door. So that's sort of where my position. I'm not sure if Nick's got a view on that from an agent point of view, but that's sort of where I sit with respect to it.
Yeah, I might. Hey, Ernest.
Hi, Nick.
We haven't been in a position where we've needed to offer anything to any of the local buyers, and I think the important thing is that we've sold so many, even throughout a pandemic. To get to over 60% with 70-30 ratio of owner occupiers, without having to, throw as Paul is. If you compare it to Melbourne, things happening there, but they're in a lot of trouble. The vacancy rates are getting way too high now, and also you compare it to here, it's a much different prospect for buying an apartment here. So I think the benefit is the long-term capital growth that we can offer, and has been offered over the past couple of years, and not one of the buyers have needed or wanted anything over and above what they've got, and that's value for money, and it's very obvious because there's been that flurry of buyers.
Yeah. One of the things that Paul mentioned that resonated very well with me is that as a developer, the developer is also cognizant of the fact of leaving the money on the table as well, selling value for money, but also leaving money on the table for the buyer to actually capitalize on as well. And that actually is a fantastic formula for good investment opportunity or good investment product, where it's all win together. The developer only wins when the buyer wins, so that's great.
It sure is. That's why I wanted to represent him, because it makes sense right across the board.
Well done. Very good. Paul, last question before I leave both of you. What I wanted to do was actually showcase a little bit of the pictures that I have taken from the brochures that I've obtained for our viewers who don't have the brochures in front of them. If I could get you to just highlight a little bit or talk about them a little bit, we could actually go to the brochure and highlight what are the interesting aspects. My personal favorite is the fact that regardless of whichever view that you take, the north, south, east, or west, you are going to have a spectacular view. So it depends also on what you like to view. But let's go through the view. Let's go through the deck, and then we can have a chat.
Sure.
Great.
So that's the top floor looking sort of northeast. So the top of the Ryrie home has a I'm not sure how large it is. I think it's about 300 odd plus square meters of external terrace and barbecue seating and landscaping area for all the owners and their guests. And then on top of that, internally to the right of the cursor, there is an indoor dining room that can be booked through the management of the building for dinner parties and functions. You want to have guests over, and there's too many to fit in your apartment. You want to have a function or a party, then you're able to book that room out, and we think it's a great facet or a great part of the development and the amenity that it offers. This image here is the living area of one of the apartments on the northeast corner. As you can see in the background, the old council offices. I think that's a post office there. Clock hour. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, it's floor-to-ceiling glass. 2.9 high ceilings, exposed concrete soffit. That's a light colour palette in terms of what we're offering. Pre-engineered kitchen cupboards, and that's got a porcelain Calcutta stone bench, island bench in that one.
Nice.
This is the same apartment, another similar apartment, but looking back towards the kitchen and dining area. So as you can see, the volume of space is quite exceptional relative to other buildings where they're compromised in terms of ceiling heights. So one of the things we wanted to try and achieve, apartments vary in size. The one bedrooms in this building sort of range from 55 square meters, which is quite large for a one bedroom, but it's 6 squares in the old. And what we wanted to try and do is, even though it's a one bedroom, we want to add, or a 2 bedroom, for whatever it is, we wanted to try and create that level of space and volume, and that by having a high ceiling, that assists us quite significantly. And then similarly with the floor to ceiling glass, it obviously compounds and promotes that. So we're trying to create a level of spaciousness in an apartment, whatever the size.
Nice. And I also noticed it's either dark or light tone colorings.
This is a light tone again, and this is another apartment type looking back towards the island bench or the kitchen bench servery area, and then you can see in the background we've got the kitchen appliances sort of covered, that sort of backs onto the kitchen where the fridge and that light is to the left hand side.
Well done.
This is a typical bathroom. Again, the bathrooms are pretty much all the same in terms of their finishes, and it changes the color palette from a dark to light.
Sorry. This is the darker color one that you were mentioning just now, the 2 options.
Darker color, yeah. Yeah, so this is a darker one. So this one has an Aero Marquina porcelain stone top. It's got a dark pre-finished veneer board, and the only constant in this is that the flooring remains the same. So the flooring throughout the dark and the light is the same. So it's a European French oak pre-finished board, and then the rest. So you can see the lights on the soffit are a dark track light, and whereas in the light we had the white one. So just some slight or subtle differences.
Cool. Sorry, this is a repeat again, but this is actually the dark one.
It's the dark stone and the dark veneer.
Yeah. This is the bedroom. I take it. I love the fact at the back.
Typical bedroom. Again, floor to ceiling glass. The master bedroom in this instance, we've got a timber paneling that it's a feature that the architect interior designers come up with that sits behind the bedhead, and that's a feature in all the master bedrooms for all the apartments. So that's a north-facing view from level 13. So what that doesn't show, if you pan to the right, and you probably get a much broader understanding of how, because the Corio Bay sort of pivots around to the east, so you'll be able to see that in the background, and as you continue to pivot around, then you get views across the back towards the hills and back over to Kidinya Park.
Yeah, so this is the immediate south.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this is the east. So if you pivot at the first picture and the third picture,
as you can see to the east on the left hand side of that image, if you sort of stitch that back across, it's probably close to a 280 or 290 degree sort of pitch that you have from the east all the way to the west, to be honest, and probably a little bit further sort of southeast, to be honest. So and we're so close. We're only a couple hundred meters away from the water. We're perched up at one of the highest points in the CBD in that western section. So we're not going to be built out in terms of any developments directly either to the east or to the west at this point.
I just wanted to highlight to our viewers, remember the picture where we actually showed the clock tower? This is the clock tower.
Correct.
That's actually in the picture, the rendering that was done earlier. So unobstructed views, amazing views.
Council or the post office? It was the post office. Sorry, I thought it was the council chambers. It was the original post office.
That's brilliant. And this is the west view, the west-facing view. again, you are pushed up very, very high. I take it there won't be anything that's going to be blocking your view.
So the view, that panorama doesn't probably give it justice, because if you stitch the photos all together, you'll be able to see on the right-hand side of that, as you sort of pivot more to the east, you'll basically get the bay, because the bay sort of follows back around. And depending on which apartment you're in, you've got either complete bay views or bay glimpses, depending on the angle of your apartment.
Well done. These are just some pictures I took off from Google with regard to nightlife at Malop Street.
So this is exactly the area that I was referring to earlier. This is the location of our display suite on the corner of Little Malop and James Street. And we're basically diagonally opposite one of these buildings. I'm just trying to see which
is it. This one.
And this is that area that I was referring to, that's got a variety of different eateries and cafes and bars. So it's very active during the day, and similarly as active at night. So there's a lot of ambience, a lot of activity, which is great, and amenities. So.
Excellent. This becomes actually very important as well. I like the fact that when you actually put the deck together, you actually had a market appraisal in as well. This is the potential rental rates for 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom floor plan, goes up all the way to 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Can I ask you, in doing this, was this a conservative estimate, or was this the
Yeah, it is. It's a conservative estimate that was done probably 6 months ago now, maybe a little bit more. So we're probably just before the end of last year, to be honest. So, and it doesn't take into consideration any forward forecasting between now and when we're ready to sort of settle the apartments. So there'd be further growth, I suspect, on those numbers based on we went to several agents across and valuers across the Geelong region to come up with those numbers. Yeah. So we believe that they're on the conservative side. One of the other things that we should make mention from an investor perspective in terms of what underwrites to an extent Geelong from a tenant or an investor perspective from their point of view, is that you've got Barwon Health. Barwon Health, one of the biggest medical providers in the region. They historically get interns from not only interstate but from overseas and locally from the Melbourne metro area, specialist doctors that come here for extended periods of time that need accommodation, that are either rented on behalf of them via Barwon Health. We've got Deakin, which will be back up and running, they say, by the end of the year. WorkSafe, NDIS, Cotton On. We've got some really large employment drivers that obviously employ significant amount of people that need accommodation. So, we're really comfortable and confident with sort of what's going to underpin an investment in terms of being able to tenant the product out, and we're really comfortable and confident with those numbers.
Well, as a person who is renting in Geelong right now, and I've been also speaking to other people who are looking for accommodation who are renting right now as well, I can tell you that these rates are really conservative. These are not optimistic or literally overly optimistic numbers. These are very realistic and very conservative numbers on that end. So it can only go up from here.
Definitely.
Excellent. Well, I think at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, what we've hoped to actually uncover and share with you is what I consider the gem of Geelong. Why do I say that? It's because, as you've heard from not just Nick, you've also heard it from Paul, they've actually put a lot of effort, a lot of passion into making sure that this product not just meets with the demands of the times today, but also for the future. And with all things that's happening in Geelong right now, and as your person on the ground over here, I can tell you, it's gangbusters. And the time to buy is not yesterday. If you're not going to make a decision today to buy tomorrow, I can only say that the prices will continue to go up and you may miss the boat or pay more. So with that, thank you so much for your time, Paul. I really appreciate you taking the time to share things with us.
Not a problem. Anytime.
Yeah, I really hope that at the end of the day, the next time when we speak, you tell me, Ernest, I'm so sorry, there's nothing left. You were late.
We can do that. We can do that with that in person.
And at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, tune in again if you want to know more next week, when we actually show a little bit more in terms of demographic movements and how Geelong is going to be able to capitalize, and where these numbers that is being quoted last week and this week is going to be based on. And lastly, if you need to know more information with regard to Ryrie Homes, do drop me a line, send me a private message, or feed me any questions that you may have so that I can actually field them to Paul or Nick and get you the answers that you need. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Ernest. Cheers.
Take care.